In 2011, I was rushed to the ER suffering from a very high fever brought on by septic shock. I was quickly admitted and was put on a course of intravenous antibiotics called Levaquin. A few nights into my treatment, I was unable to sleep and found myself content with watching late-night television. My attention would frequently wander over to the open door and to the nurses and staff passing by the door. On one such occasion, a woman happened to slowly pass by me, and I muttered, which was out of character for me, "Hello." The woman was very pretty with a pale complexion, with very, very blue eyes, and her face was framed by nearly shoulder-length brown hair. She smiled at me and then pressed her index finger to her lips and let out a soft, "Shh." She then continued down the hall and out of sight. I replayed the odd occurrence in my mind, and it then occurred to me that she wasn't wearing the scrubs of a modern nurse, but rather the white outfit of some turn-of-the-century nurse. The next morning, I asked the attending if there was some sort of costume party the night before, and I was told no. A few days later, after my fever had broken, I found myself being wheeled out of the hospital, and we passed by a mural of the hospital's history, including a bunch of photos of women wearing similar outfits. Whenever I relate the story to others, they tell me that I was dreaming, and my seeing the photos put that information in my head. I never saw the mural, I say. I was admitted through the emergency room, not the main entrance. To this day, I'm confused by the experience. I've never had any type of paranormal happening. One believer told me that I was being watched over by a kind spirit, but I don't know what to believe. I have only had a few experiences, but this one took place a couple of weeks ago when I was babysitting my cousin. It was 10:30 a.m. and I decided to take my little 2-year-old cousin to the park to tire her out for a nap. We were there for almost 2 hours when I figured it was time to leave. "Shy, time to go home," I called. She didn't answer. From where she was standing, you can see a path that goes to the basketball court. "Shyla, is someone walking through the path?" I asked her, but she didn't answer. She did start smiling and laughing, though. "Shyla, is someone standing there?" I asked. "No, Kay, someone on the bench," she told me. At this point, I was so scared, so I took Shyla and ran back to my uncle's house. Later that day, I told her mother what had happened, and she was pretty surprised, but she 100% believed it. But later on, we asked her who she had seen. "Grammy," she replied. Grammy is the name we called my grandmother, who died 6 years ago from cancer, so Shyla has never seen her. She only knows what she looks like from pictures from before she got sick with cancer, so I believe maybe my Grammy was saying hi, or maybe comforting her, seeing as her dad was sentenced to jail that day, and his court was going on at that time. But my question is, why didn't I see her too? I'm not that old, I'm only 15. But thanks for reading, and tell me what you think. Just recently, I was at J. Timothy's Tavern in Plainville, Connecticut with a friend. We were standing in the entry-exit way, waiting to be seated when she pointed to someone standing by the fireplace. I couldn't hear what she said, but I noticed a single, solitary man standing alone, staring off into the distance. I was surprised no one else was looking at him because he stuck out like a sore thumb in his blue tailor jacket and blank expression. My friend left me briefly to talk with somebody, and while she had her back turned, the man walked past me. It creeped me out the way he stared straight ahead, and no one else was looking at him. He gave me a strange feeling, so strange that I wanted to reach out and touch him, just to make sure that he was real. Instead, I just watched him walk past me and into the next room. And I can't quite explain it, but I just didn't see him anymore. I thought maybe he had ducked down onto one of the bar stools, but nevertheless decided to mention it to my friend when she returned to me. "That man you are pointing to was creepy," I told her. "What man?" she questioned, confused. She said she'd been pointing to one of the waitresses and hadn't even seen anyone by the fireplace. We decided to investigate by wandering into the first room, but as I studied the faces and jackets, he wasn't there. The only room that he could have been in was closed off. But on our investigation, we discovered a set of stairs leading up to a private party room, overlooking the other one, including some of the hall we had just been in. I studied every face, every jacket, and he wasn't among them. We continued searching every other room, and he wasn't anywhere. What do you think? I am originally from Connecticut and only have a few friends there that I still visit. One in particular, Steve. And I made it a point to hang out whenever I come home, to go on what we call our ghost rides. We are both very interested in anything paranormal, and seems something creepy always ends up happening when we're together. This was the scariest. To back up this story, I have to tell part of the story of our house on Lindley Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Anyone who has grown up in that area knows about it. Apparently, a few decades or so ago, the house was possessed by an evil entity. The stories about the house were quite eccentric and included levitating objects, talking animals, and the possession of the family's daughter. This story in particular received more attention because 1, the Warrens investigated it, and 2, respected police chiefs and fire chiefs are quoted in their papers about the horrendous things that they had experienced. Like the Amityville house, many believed it to be a hoax, but regardless, the story stuck. Lindley Street is like any other street with old small houses lining it. Except now an apartment building stands in place of this particular old house. Steve and his mother are accustomed to the paranormal. Steve grew up in a very haunted house and has seen full-body apparitions to dark shadows. His mother also experienced everything paranormal, and she told us a story of her experience on the Lindley Street in Bridgeport. She had gone to a party with Steve's dad when she was younger, and the party was about a block from the infamous house on Lindley Street. This was obviously before it was torn down. Steve's mother, Steve's dad, and a friend walked the street, and Steve's mother claims that when they passed the house, the door was wide open. She was shocked, as it was October or November and quite cold out. Not to mention no one lived there anymore. She claims to have seen 2 red eyes in the door frame and became quite frightened. The 2 men passed it off to anything they possibly could. Ultimately, they decided it was a prank. When the door slammed shut, it startled her, and she never did believe them that it was just a prank, or a reflecting light, or whatever. So I was home one weekend, and Steve and I left our friend's house to go on a ghost ride. This usually entailed us driving around, sharing scary stories. We were on a dark road, and he was telling me about his mother's encounter on Lindley Street. And for his finale, he decided to phone his mother, put her on speakerphone, and have her tell the rest of the story herself. He did, and she told us the story just as Steve had said. She began telling us the history of the house, when the family had lived there, when all of a sudden the entire car shook with such a loud, deep yell horn groan. It's impossible to explain without anyone actually hearing it, but tears formed in my eyes. I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to stories like these, but that sound was truly evil and terrifying. It was as if it was everywhere at once. Outside and inside the car, in our ears, in our heads, everywhere. And then just like that, it stopped. Steve was silent as his mother continued speaking. In a shaky voice, he told her he needed to call her back. He pulled over and we just looked at each other. We had both heard it, but couldn't explain it. It was the middle of the night, and although we tried to put a familiar noise to what it could have been, we simply couldn't. We called his mom back to explain what happened, and she gave us the old, when you speak or think of something enough, eventually it comes to you. We decided not to speak about it again. Of course, no one believed us, or could fully understand the impact it had. I'm still unsure as to what it was, or if it was the cause of us dabbling in the paranormal too much or often, but regardless, it still gives me chills thinking about it. My name is Vanessa, and I'll start by saying that this is the first time I've posted anything on this site, although I've been reading the site adamantly for a while now. I have also had a few unexplainable paranormal experiences in my life which I have spent many years trying to understand by studying the paranormal. The one that stands out the most was my first very real, notable experience with the paranormal. It was when my parents had just moved us into a new house, which was a big deal at the time since we never had much money growing up because my parents had the three of us very young and didn't finish school or anything. Because of that, we lived with my grandmother, which was definitely not big enough for all of us. However, when we moved in, our family started changing. We were always a close family, especially since we all practically shared a room at the old house. So it was definitely weird. My dad started drinking a lot, and because of it, my parents fought constantly, and my brother, who was always the closest to me, started being a jerk and really more hostile. He was 5 years older than me at the time, and I was 10, so he was 15. But up until now, it didn't matter, where now anything I said was childish and really just annoyed him. Not long after we moved in, I started having nightmares, extremely vivid and real. It was never exactly the same, but it was always me in the dream, in the exact same clothes that I went to bed in, and I was hiding in my house or running in my new house from some man who looked to be in his late 60s. He was tallish and really slim. He had a hat on most of the time, like an Abe Lincoln hat. And don't ask why I know, he was evil, but he was. In my dream, I never knew why I was trying to stay away from this man, but I was. Luckily enough, I always woke up before he caught me. When I would wake up, I always jumped up like most people do when they have a nightmare. Only, I would be sweating disgustingly, and my heart would be racing and would lay there until I could finally fall back to sleep. About 3 months after the nightmare started, my brother started praying every night before he would go to bed, which he never did before. I didn't ask him why though, I didn't want to look stupid. Also, I never told my parents even though I knew they believed in the paranormal and probably would have believed me, but there was so much tension now, I just wasn't used to it, so I would just avoid being home or talking to them and always be out riding bikes with the kids in the neighborhood. Anyway, I again had the dream where I was running from whoever this man was again. Only, it was different. Because usually, I didn't see him much in the dream, it was just mainly me running from him. This night he had a knife, and he wouldn't catch up with me, but every time I turned to look, he was right there, just staring at me. I jumped awake at some point during it and was more scared than usual. I was laying on my side and was frozen there for like 3 to 5 minutes, and I remember I felt silly because I was 10 and I shouldn't be so scared. I jokingly thought to myself that at least he never catches up with me. And as I thought this to myself, I rolled to lay on my back, so I would be facing the ceiling rather than the wall. And when I did, the man from my dream was standing on the other side of my tiny little twin bed, leaning over the bed like he was waiting for me to lay back. He looked exactly like he did, and was wearing the Abe Lincoln hat and had a black, old-looking trench coat on. I was terrified and had that heart-dropping feeling like someone knocked the wind out of me. I screamed as soon as I realized what I saw, and as I did, he was just gone. My brother woke up because we shared a room, and he jumped up and asked what was going on. I felt stupid, so I said nothing, and usually he would pry for an answer. This time, he just said, "It's okay, Ness," my nickname, and told me it's just a dream and to go back to sleep. I know this wasn't a dream. There's just no way. I also knew what sleep paralysis is, and it wasn't that either. What I saw that night was a demon, and judging by my brother's reaction, he had seen him too, or at least had experienced the same nightmares, because I never said it was a dream or what I saw, or that I saw the horrible man. We never talked about anything in the morning, or at all really, and I've never told anyone this experience until now. Also, I should share that the strange part of this all is that I didn't really have anything else happen to me there, to myself at least. Little things would happen like the feeling that you're not alone or being watched, and stupid little things would move by themselves. Like my pens would go from my bed to my sock drawer, or when I left the room for a second, my drink would be moved to the other end of the table. And I know nobody would bother to do that, or when I was alone there. Also, I would occasionally hear footsteps or the sound of muffled whispers of a man and a younger girl, a toddler it sounded like, always from the other end of the house when I was home alone. But what's strange is that was the first and only time he showed himself to me like that. We moved out shortly after into a house that was the same price and bigger, so my parents took it. I don't know if anyone else had any experiences, but like I said, I think my brother had the same nightmares as me. I really like this series, ghouls. I can't wait to keep going. Oh my gosh, like there's so many interesting stories from each state. It's nuts. Like you'd think only like super historic states would have like, paranormal and spiritual stories and stuff, but it's like all of them. Man, it's crazy. And oh my god, you guys saw my face. You know what I look like. And you guys are all so nice. You're so kind. Oh my goodness. Ugh. It's crazy. It's been a crazy week, ghouls. Crazy week. Ugh. Anyway. As always, the last video will be on the top left. My next video will be on the bottom left. On the screen here will show all of my social medias and whatnot. And they will also be in the description below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.